I was looking to file a police report or potentially even a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend. He's also a state trooper, so I'm especially uncomfortable.
My boyfriend and I just heard something very strange. We heard gunshots and also screaming.
New Jersey veterinarian Lauren Semanchik was in fear of her life, scared that her ex-boyfriend would hurt her. And she was right. On August 1st of this year, Ricardo Santos, a New Jersey state trooper, shot her and her new boyfriend Tyler Webb before turning the gun on himself. And in a sick twist, we're learning that 911 calls that night were basically ignored by local police, leaving their bodies to be found hours later by family members. We're explaining what led up to a state investigation into the police department, plus the charges against the officer who went to get pizza instead of doing his job. I'm Elizabeth Millner, and this is Inside the Crime. The community of Franklin Township, New Jersey was left devastated earlier this year when a state trooper murdered his ex-girlfriend, a beloved local veterinarian, and her new boyfriend, a mechanic and volunteer firefighter named Tyler Webb. Dr. Lauren Semanchik had been fearful something like this could happen. The 33-year-old and her then-boyfriend, 45-year-old state trooper Ricardo Santos, broke up in September of 2024. Ricardo, who had once served on New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy's security detail, reportedly started stalking Lauren. Her family says she blocked him, but calls kept coming in from restricted numbers, and she was worried he might be following her. She threatened to file a restraining order, but that didn't seem to stop him. On May 19th, Lauren's car was reportedly vandalized while she was at work at Long Valley Animal Hospital. Her car was keyed across the side. She went to the Washington Township Police Department in Morris County, New Jersey to file a report. According to the report reviewed by the New York Post, officers there called Ricardo directly, warning him to stay away from her. Ricardo denied involvement in keying her car, but he did agree he wouldn't contact her. The next day, on May 20th, Lauren went to the Franklin Township Police Department in Hunterdon County where she had lived to speak with an officer. She was told no one was available, but she was given a phone number. It's important to note here that this is a small 6-member police department, but take a listen to the voicemail she left. It's chilling.
Hi there, my name is Lauren Semanchik, and I live at Upper Kingstown Road in Pittstown, New Jersey. I was looking to file a police report or potentially even a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend who has been harassing me. He placed recording devices in my home, has continued to text me and call me, and then I just came out last night from work and my car had been keyed and I have no idea who did it, but I don't have anybody else in my life with any animosity. He's also a state trooper, so I'm especially uncomfortable. I just stopped in the office, but nobody was available, so the girl at the front desk gave me this number. If you could give me a call back when you have a moment, that would be great. My phone number is, thank you.
Her call was reportedly never returned, and just 3 months later, Lauren was found dead. Her body was discovered alongside Tyler on the back porch of her home by her own father, nearly 20 hours after they were shot. Ricardo Santos would later be found dead in Piscataway, New Jersey, after taking his own life in his car. A semi-automatic handgun found with him is believed to be the weapon that killed Lauren and Tyler. So here's what we know about that day. On August 1st, Lauren left work and headed home, with Tyler arriving just a few minutes later. That's when Ricardo, who had apparently been following Lauren, confronted her. Gunshots rang out and terrified neighbors started calling 911.
And I don't know if I'm watching too many movies or what, but, my boyfriend and I just heard something very strange. We heard gunshots and also screaming. And the screaming sounded, pretty close. And then, when it stopped, the last shot, it was quiet. And then I thought it was kids maybe laughing or something. I couldn't tell. We had music going.
Okay.
And, yeah, anyway.
We have patrol responding out to the area to check it out, okay?
And again, I hope I'm not bothering anybody, but it was too weird.
Franklin Township Police.
Hi, I'm sorry. We don't typically do this, but we just heard something that sounded really strange.
Over Upper Kingstown
there
Road
were
area?
about 7-ish gunshots. We thought we heard some screaming, and then the noises stopped. Hello?
Hello? Yeah, Upper Kingstown Road area?
We're on White Bridge Road.
Okay, yeah, we have a report of that, yeah.
Okay.
About 5,
yeah,
6
it was
shots,
about like 5-ish minutes ago, and it just sounded really weird, so we felt like we had to say something.
Yeah, I have an officer on his way in the area.
Okay.
911, where's the emergency?
It's not actually on this property, but I just heard a bunch of gunshots. It sounded very loud.
Okay, and what's
the
the address?
Season. on Upper Kingtown Road. It's not on this property. I just heard it from this property, and I heard some screaming. Like, I'm up on the hill, so It sounded like down the hill, and maybe...
How many of them did you hear?
5
Just
6.
round about 5 to 6? And that's just before you called?
Yeah, no, it was very loud. I mean, but sound really carries here. Yeah,
All right, I'll send patrol out to the area. If it continues to happen, just give us a call back, but I got them going your way.
Okay, I haven't heard anything since. It was the screaming that made me a little nervous.
But it was right before you called, correct?
It was, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, not a problem. I'll send them someone out.
Okay,
All right, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Dispatch said an officer was on his way to check things out. That was Officer Kevin Bolero, who was promoted to sergeant around 5 years ago. Video of his swearing in is on YouTube, but now his commitment to his pledge to protect and serve is in question. It turns out that Sergeant Bolero decided to delay responding to the shooting so he could stop by an ATM to withdraw cash. Then he reportedly drove by the area, and when he didn't see or hear anything suspicious, he left to go get pizza. Yeah, pizza. He's now facing charges of official misconduct and tampering with records. A news release from the Hunterdon County Prosecutor provides details about Sergeant Bolero's movements that night. It says, quote, "The Hunterdon County Prosecutor's Office learned that on Friday, August 1st, 2025, at approximately 7:08 p.m., an individual from 31 Upper Kington Road, Pittstown, called to report gunshots and screaming. A dispatcher relayed that information to an on-duty officer, FTPD Sergeant Kevin Bolero, who acknowledged the transmission. Data from GPS and surveillance footage revealed that instead of immediately responding to the call for service, Bolero drove approximately 1.5 miles in the opposite direction of the caller's location to the TD Bank on Route 41 in Clinton Township, at which he conducted a personal ATM transaction. And if you thought it was bad, it got worse. The prosecutor says approximately 5 minutes after the first call, a second caller from 5 Whitebridge Road reported gunshots and screaming, which was relayed to and acknowledged by Bolero, who was continuing his ATM transaction. Bolero then departed the TD Bank and proceeded towards the locations without activating his police vehicle's emergency lights and sirens. In the meantime, 911 calls are continuing to come in from the area around Lauren's home. Approximately 5 minutes after the second call, a third caller from 18 Upper Kington Road reported gunshots and screaming, which was relayed to and acknowledged by Bolero. Approximately 8 minutes later, GPS data located Bolero at 41 Upper Kington Road, presumably where he was speaking with the first caller for approximately 4 to 6 minutes. However, because Bolero failed to activate his body-worn camera, the precise length of his interaction is unknown. So we know that Bolero is getting these transmissions from dispatch because he acknowledges them, but then he fails to really do any sort of investigation and doesn't turn on his body cam according to prosecutors. The news release notes that Bolero told dispatchers he didn't hear anything in the area of Upper Kington Road, so he would go check things out on nearby White Bridge Road. By 7:40 p.m., around half an hour after he was first notified that neighbors heard multiple gunshots at a home, Bolero radioed dispatch to clear him from the scene. According to the prosecutor's office, further investigation revealed that Bolero did not speak with either the second or third callers. Rather, GPS data showed that he traveled partially down White Bridge Road, but never stopped to further investigate. At this point, Sergeant Bolero, who was working on an overnight shift, had apparently developed an appetite. Quote, GPS data further showed that Bolero immediately traveled to Duke's Pizzeria and Restaurant at 371 Pittstown Road, Pittstown, and remained there for approximately 50 minutes. He was later seen parking at and walking towards the Pittstown Inn, where he remained for approximately 57 minutes, engaging socially with patrons according to witnesses. GPS data also revealed that Bolero spent approximately 5 consecutive hours of his duty shift from approximately 11:27 p.m. until 4:33 a.m. at Locust Grove Cemetery, during which no law enforcement activity was recorded by him. Bolero later submitted a report documenting his investigation into the calls for service on August 1st, 2025, in which he falsely stated that he was unable to make contact with the caller from White Bridge Road. GPS data and surveillance footage showed that during the period he claimed to be canvassing Upper Kington Road, Bolero was not in the immediate area, but he was en route to Duke's Pizzeria in Pittstown. Sergeant Bolero was hit with a second-degree official misconduct charge for knowingly refraining refraining from performing his police duties with the purpose of obtaining a personal benefit, as well as a charge of disorderly persons tampering with public records or information for allegedly knowingly making false statements in his Franklin Township police report. Bolero was already on administrative leave when the charges against him were announced. In the wake of Lauren and Tyler's deaths, both Franklin Police Chief Timothy Snyder and Sergeant Bolero were suspended over serious concerns about the police department's operations and effectiveness. The prosecutor's office had been supervising day-to-day operations since August. An attorney for Lauren and Tyler's families released this statement. The Semanchik and Webb families are shocked at Sergeant Bolero's egregious conduct as charged by the Hunterdon County prosecutor. We believe this to be the tip of the iceberg of the many failures by the local and state police, which will be uncovered and which led to the murders of Lauren and Tyler. The families are also filing a lawsuit against local and state police for failing to protect the couple. Bolero's attorney also fired back in his own statement, saying in part, quote, "A woman and her friend were tragically killed in a domestic violence incident, and we have only wishes for peace and strength for those families. However, nothing Kevin Bolero did or did not do that day impacted or could have stopped that tragedy in any way." He added, "I do not comment on other matters being investigated, but with regard to Sergeant Bolero, the evidence will show that there were delays in these 911 calls being made and dispatched. The evidence will show that shots fired calls of this nature are a regular occurrence in this community, especially as hunting season is approaching. The evidence will show there are no practices or policies about putting on lights and sirens and responding at high speeds to such calls. The evidence will show that Sergeant Bolero talked to someone who made a call. The evidence will show he canvassed the area thoroughly. Sergeant Kevin Bolero had faithfully served that community for nearly 25 years and is not guilty of anything related to this horrendous killing. This prosecution is unfortunate." I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney, emergency medical technician, and former head New Jersey County prosecutor, Bob Bianchi. Bob, always great to see you, and thank you so much for being here today. You know, I got to get your reaction to this story. Have you ever seen something like this happen before, where a cop is supposed to be on a call, but he's out getting pizza?
Yeah, honestly, I have seen it before. And as my former title as the head New Jersey County prosecutor, one of my roles in that was to be the chief law enforcement officer over all the municipal police departments within my jurisdiction. And my county was 44 police agencies. And if there was ever an internal affairs issue or any kind of police misconduct, it eventually would trickle up to my office to be investigated. And when I was reading this, and of course this has tragic consequences, I can't count how many times IA complaints have been filed or police have falsified that they were in one place doing something when in fact they were not doing an official duty. They were doing something personal or not doing anything at all. So it's actually in my mind, I don't want to say it's a common occurrence, but it didn't shock me when I saw it.
Wow, that's actually pretty eye-opening, you know, and the prosecutor's office there was able to lay out nearly minute-by-minute timeline of Bolero's travel on August 1st. One would assume that Bolero knew that he was possibly being monitored, but either way, he didn't think or notice or possibly even care about it. Does that indicate to you that he probably has done this before?
Well, I don't want to ascribe of somebody whether they've done something before or not, but I do believe that it may be indicative of obviously an officer. What would get me as a prosecutor is if he felt that he could do that with such impunity on a call that's coming in of significance, a 911, shots fired, people screaming, that what is the culture of that police department in general? Usually these officers, now you can always have an errant officer, don't get me wrong, but with something that is so bold like that, that speaks to me of a cultural issue within the department. So I certainly, as the prosecutor, am going to be looking at that to see whether or not this agency is performing and monitoring its officers in an appropriate manner, aside from the prosecution of this particular case.
And talk to me a little bit about what the prosecution is kind of looking for in terms of their investigation into Bolero, as well as the Franklin Township Police Department. What all are they going to be looking for?
Well, they're going to be looking at whether or not the most important thing of any internal affair of any police department, at least by my humble estimation, and I was an expert on this, is your internal affairs practices. Now, internal affairs, a lot of times cops want to move away from that, and they're afraid of it, and it's a scary thing to them, and they feel like there's Big Brother looking at them. But in truth, what internal affairs also does is to make sure that there's rules of the road that are set up so that officers know when their conduct is going over the line and they can be recorrected before a tragedy happens. So I am definitely, as the county prosecutor, going to be looking into the customs, the policies, the procedures. I'm going to be looking at other investigative aspects as to whether or not other officers falsified police reports. This is not a good thing. This is a very bad thing when you have officers that are falsifying police reports. Let's put aside that there was a double murder that occurred here. Now I'm looking at whether or not this agency can be trusted to give me accurate information as a prosecutor when I'm prosecuting other cases they have, whether it be for anything from a motor vehicle to a crime. So this is going to be, if the prosecutor is going to do their job correctly, and this is a good prosecutor, I know this prosecutor personally, is probably going to be looking at a much more global thing. Is this an errant, one and done kind of scenario, or is this indicative of a bigger problem? And then likely, at least if it were me, I'm going to roll that out to the entire community that I supervise to say, don't let this be you.
Yeah, and maybe the conversation would be a little different if it wasn't the pizza excuse, and I hate to call it that way because something so tragic happened during this time, but I'm thinking, you know, what if his child was sick or something like that and he had to take him to the hospital? Maybe that would explain it, but just to know that as prosecutors were tracking his movement and behaviors, to see him at a pizza parlor while this was going on is pretty shocking. And you know, just looking at the other side, Bolero's attorney released a statement that provided several excuses for his alleged behavior, including that shots fired calls are a regular occurrence, and basically said that nothing Bolero did that day would have changed the outcome. You're a criminal defense attorney now. What's your reaction to that?
Okay, well, I don't want to attack one of my fellow colleagues, but let me just say, you know, sometimes you got to dance with the one you brought.
Yeah.
Okay. And so putting lipstick on a pig, I don't know. I guess we could call these things a lot of different analogies that we could talk about here. But the bottom line here is we don't know whether or not some intervention, and here's, I'll put my EMT hat on, seconds make a difference between life and death. There are interventions that can occur that can save a life, including people who have been shot. People have been shot numerous times. There were 3, I believe, calls, at least 2, maybe 3 calls that are going on here. So we don't really know whether or not, and the investigation will detail further, whether there was a possibility of saving these individuals. We'll never know, will we, for sure, because the officer didn't do what the officer was supposed to have done here. So, you know, this is, yeah, you look at it like you say, he was getting pizza, but the bottom line is, let me just tell you, this community is an affluent suburban community. The concept, when I heard shots fired all the time, I had to laugh. Yeah. I mean, maybe you hear hunting, but you don't hear screaming going on. This is one of the most affluent communities in the United States of America. So this was not something that was typical. Why this officer chose not to respond to a call of this magnitude is befuddling.
Yeah. And do you see a case like this going to trial, or do you possibly see or expect a plea deal of some sort?
Going to be a plea deal, because what he's hit with here is not, let's make sure we don't confuse something here. He's not being charged with the death. You know, maybe you could argue manslaughter, you know, failure to act, had some sort of involvement. That would be really hard for prosecutors to prove. He's being charged with an act of official misconduct, and under New Jersey law, it is a draconian, very harsh statute that carries between 5 to 10 years with 85% that you may have to serve before, or I should say up to half that you may have to serve before you're eligible for parole. So significant state prison, up to 5-year period of parole and eligibility that attaches with that sentence. In other words, it's very, very significant. They're going to run to get a plea deal because this act clearly, in my mind, factually, if what we know about it is accurate, is going to be the facts necessary to sustain the charge of official misconduct. Nobody wants to go to trial on a case where they're going to get a mandatory minimum of 5 years in state prison. So they're going to be making a deal here. In my opinion, the defense is going to run to the prosecutor and say, let's work something out here. And that's where the argument that his actions didn't actually prevent the situation and wouldn't have made a difference will weigh on the prosecutor, because if the prosecutor has any inclination that it may have made a difference, they're not likely to give a very favorable plea offer.
And do you think, you know, with what we know so far and just where the investigation's kind of going right now, do you think his career is over as a police officer?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it's going to be over on so many levels, it's not even funny. Not in addition to the fact that even if he were exonerated of this crime, the bottom line here is that stapled to his police jacket is going to be that he falsified a police report, which makes him essentially, that information goes to every defense attorney on every single case. Forget to put this case aside. Even if a cop keeps his job who's lied before, that is going to be able to be used for cross-examination, which renders him really ineffective as a police officer, because part of your job is testifying. And every time you testify, what value is he to me as a prosecutor if a defense lawyer is going to cross-examine him that he's falsified reports in the past? His career is DOA.
And, you know, based on what happened in the lead up to Lauren and Tyler's murders, do you think their families have a strong civil case?
Oh, wow. That's a much more complex problem in my mind. And I'm not a civil rights attorney, but in my mind, you're going to have to connect some aspect of this malfeasance or failure to act as having created some harm. And that's where this timeline is really going to come in. I don't know. We're talking about hours. If I recall the facts here, we're talking about on August 1st at 7:08 p.m., right, is where he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. And I don't think the bodies are found until the next day at 12:22 p.m. Now, if you're going to get an autopsy report that's going to say that somebody was alive and likely died at 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, and that they were just laying there, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, because this guy didn't do the job he did, then you got yourself one heck of a good suit. But we're going to have to wait to see what that evidence is. If it's no, there was instantaneous death and it wouldn't have made a difference, I don't think it's such a good case in my mind.
And you can really see it kind of going for both sides there. And I know there's a lot of conversation just about the attitude towards law enforcement, but when we look at this particular case, how does something like this affect the community and its attitude towards law enforcement, in your opinion?
Well, as a prosecutor, I can tell you that that's one of the reasons I'm going to take a very aggressive posture with this, because I want to assure the community that actions like this would be taken seriously. They're going to be investigated fully. People are going to be fully held to account for it, and that we've learned from our mistakes and sent the message to the rest of the law enforcement community not to act in this manner, to your point. Because I, as a prosecutor, have to try cases. The public has to have confidence in my law enforcement community, not only that they're efficient at what they do, not only are they excellent at what they do, but they can be trusted to be truthful. It's foundational to the protection of the entire community that we support our law enforcement community. And when we have an officer that does something that's errant like this, I got to send the message out there that there will be repercussions, both to reestablish the reputation of the police to the community, but also to let the police community know we can tolerate a lot of mistakes. We can tolerate, sometimes you look back and you say, I could have done something better. But if you're acting from a good heart and you're trying to do the right thing, we can always show forgiveness in those circumstances. This is not one of those instances.
And I guess we'll see how this continues to unfold. But I do want to ask you this final question, Bob. If you had a crystal ball, where do you see this case landing in maybe a few weeks, a few months? What are your thoughts on where this case could end up?
I see a defense attorney that's going to run to prosecutors very quickly. I think a lot of it depends on what the autopsy is going to show us. If the autopsy shows us that these lives could have been saved, you're going to see significant pain for this defense lawyer. If it were me and defendant, I would go to trial and try the case and hope to win the case and put the guy in jail for 5 years. That's how I feel about it. But ultimately, I think that there's going to be a resolution where he's going to give up his job. He's going to plead guilty. He's going to do some state prison time, but it's going to be less than the maximum time. I think that that's where this is going to wind up. That would be the way to kind of strike the balance for everybody here. Now, a lot's going to depend on how that officer responds to it, because I've seen some instances where we've given police officers the benefit of a moderate plea bargain, and there's an arrogance to them. Maybe that's what's going on here, where they feel that they're above the law, and then they've got to feel the pain of the trial and the sentence.
Well, we'll see how this all continues to play out. Bob Bianchi, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. I really appreciate it, and always great to see you.
My pleasure. Same here.
Kevin Bolero is due in court for his first appearance on November 5th. He could face years in prison and a huge fine if he's convicted. That does it for this episode. Be sure to check out more episodes on the Law&Crime YouTube channel. But for now, I'm Elizabeth Millner, and this has been Inside the Crime.